Hello, filmmakers, and welcome to the Wedding Film School Show, a podcast dedicated to the craft, business, and personal aspect of running a wedding film brand. The Wedding Film School Show is hosted by myself, Jared Haskell, and my longtime business partner, Jason McCutcheon. If you're looking for free resources or to get your wedding film business off the ground, make sure to check out weddingfilm.school or check us out on Instagram for news, giveaways, and more. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wedding Film School Show. We have another great episode for you today. One that actually I've been looking forward to for really years. We're like, man, we got to keep on getting this guest on over and over and over again because I think he speaks our language. We're a little bit weird. Isn't that right, Jay?
Yes.
And so we're big numbers fans. So if you're not a big numbers fan, I would encourage you, stick around. Because
we'll make you a fan.
We'll make you a fan, hopefully, because I think we still are probably creatives first, numbers guys second. But what's going on with you, Jay? How are you feeling?
We are about to do like a 3-day destination-ish wedding in Hudson Valley. So I've been thinking about that. I just got the new Rode GoPro from Rode, so I'm working on a review for that. What's funny about all of the things that we do is it's actually my job. And it's funny to think about this is my job. I think about this all the time. It's like I get to play with cameras, travel, go to parties for my job. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty cool job.
Yep. I agree with you, and also part of our job is staying up on all the, camera drama unfolding.
Oh yes. I mean, I don't know when this is dropping, but there's a little bit of YouTube drama on that at Lumix S9 and certain YouTubers and blah blah blah. So we also did not get the invite to Tokyo and Osaka either. So not offended because I don't believe that camera is really for us. But it is funny to watch, like, how people react, like, the classic thing where they're like, oh, yeah, of course you're saying good things about this camera. You got it for free. And it's like, do you want me to buy all this stuff? So you want me to make, like, 25 videos a year and spend, like, 40, 50, 60 grand just so that you believe me that I actually like this camera? It's like the absurdity of the whole YouTube world. Like, we're not real influencers, we're not real YouTubers. We're wedding filmmakers.
We get to brush by that world and just really like laugh at the drama and be involved when we're involved. But it's not a big part of our bottom line. So
no. Yeah. As a business owner, I would say YouTube is a failed business.
Yeah.
Podcasting is a bad business.
Yeah.
You know what's a good business though? Wedding filmmaking.
Heck yeah.
Hey guys, Bobby popping in quick to let you know that this episode of the podcast was brought to you by Tamron. Providing filmmakers with the perfect mix of performance and value, Tamron has every type of lens to fit your needs. With their moisture-resistant construction, close focusing abilities, 6-year warranty, and remarkable optical performance, Tamron lenses can help you upgrade your wedding films. I know I personally keep the 28-75 2.8 in my bag, and I often reach for it on a wedding day. So send them some love for making this episode possible. Check out some of their lens options in our gear link below or at www.tamron-americas.com.
It's a good business. And so I would take our guest today is kind of one of, I don't know if like we've said this to him. It's not like we have like know Shane super well, but I really consider the data that has been provided on Wedding Report to be kind of essential to how we've been able to grow so aggressively because we understand what will happen if we do X. I'm a numbers guy, right? And I like percentages, and I just tend to think like if you do certain things a certain amount of times, the water will always find its level.
Yeah.
And so when you have good data, it allows you to operate in that way. And so I wanted to introduce Shane McMurray from the Wedding Report, who's been giving us really, really helpful data on his website. And we wanted to talk about just the wedding industry and all the data surrounding it, and also his really cool website. And hopefully you guys, if you haven't tried it, head over to wedding.report. But hey, Shane, how are you doing?
Doing great. Guys, thanks so much for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having such a great service that we use all the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, numbers guy. Yeah, you said it earlier. I mean, like, this is a creative business, and that's the really challenge, right? As a creative, it's hard to kind of look at the data of your business. But the reality is, if you're running a business, you got to look at the data, or you may not be in business for a while. I always tell my wife, like, look, if we're going to grow the business, then we got to look at the numbers. We got to do this. Otherwise, it's a hobby.
Mhm.
And so if it's a hobby, then that's cool. That's fine. Hey, go for it. Right. But if you want to grow a business, you got to look at your data for your business. You got to look at the market. It's super important. Doesn't have to be the whole thing, but you need to have that part of your plan.
Yeah. It's always been surprising to me that creatives really don't like numbers, because the way Jay and I have always thought about the wedding report, numbers provided there, or really numbers in general, marketing numbers, budgets, it's just tells a story, right? And as wedding filmmakers, we're storytellers. And so we have always seen it as like, we get these numbers. What story do we want to tell moving forward to maybe change those numbers a little bit? But I think I fell in love with numbers running the business and just being like, hey, this is a great tool that we can either apply to our marketing budget, maybe try to adjust a little bit to hit more of our market or whatever. So it's always been super helpful for us. So I would love to hear a little bit about the story behind Wedding Report. You don't have to do, a long kind of intro, but just tell us a little bit about the origins, how it started, and what purpose it serves.
Yeah. So early 2002, 1, 3-ish, I had a business that was basically selling wedding invitations in the industry. We made handmade paper wedding invitations, making the pulp and stuff. I needed numbers for my business to basically understand how much do I charge, because generally people, when they think about pricing a business, especially if you're new, you just kind of go look out in the market and see what people are charging. And you kind of go, yeah, I guess I'll charge that, right? Or if you get hooked up in a certain crowd, right, you might charge what they charge. And that's not necessarily the right thing to do. So I needed information. How many people get married? How many people, and then segment that down into like, how many people actually buy handmade paper wedding invitations, essentially. And there wasn't anything out there. And so I ended up doing a bunch of research myself, created the Wedding Report as a tool for me, and felt like other people in the industry needed it. And then, so in 2005, I published my first research about the wedding industry. And then in 2007, I incorporated the business, and pretty much it's been doing its thing ever since then. So next year will be 20 years, really. Crazy to think it's been 20 years, but insane.
Well, it's annoying to me is that you were around when I started my business and we could have used it. So, why don't you tell people a little bit about the website and kind of like, what is it? What do you do for wedding professionals?
Yeah. So the whole goal really was to get the full economics of weddings, right? Because there's a lot of information out there. Media companies will say one thing and different people will say other things. But what I realized over the years is that there are a lot of people that don't work in the wedding industry that actually use this information to help them. So local government agencies use it. If you have a business plan and you're starting it, the Small Business Administration will use it to try and coordinate with, like, okay, you said your business plan is this. We don't agree because the market doesn't say it's that, right? So the goal is to help you understand the true economics of what's happening in your market. So how many people get married? How much do they spend? And what is the demand for the products and services that you would sell? Right now, we track about 57 different items. Actually going to upload probably this year sometime another 50 different items we've been tracking over the past year and a half. So we're going to really expand that list of items that we have. But essentially, the goal is to help you understand what is the demand for the product or service that you sell. How many, in other words, how many people buy that? Because just because, let's say there's 1,000 weddings in your market, that doesn't mean that 1,000 people are going to buy a wedding filmmaker, right? To make a wedding film, right? There's a smaller percentage of people that buy that service. Same thing with a dress. Not everyone buys a dress. So it's really understanding what's the demand? How many people get married? What's the total market, right? What's my total reach? What's my demand factor? And then how much do people spend? Because then you can understand, okay, well, what's the median of the spend, right? The middle of the road, what's the average? And then how does it break down in buckets so that I can see where specific segments of the market might meet, where I might be able to meet a new demand, or I might be able to grow my business, right? Like reach down, stuff like that. So it's really, that's the goal, is really help you understand the full economics of the industry in your market.
Tell me a little bit about, without giving away the secret sauce, really, like what are some places that you're sourcing to get some of this data and inform people? Because
there's no secret sauce, except you got to get data from people that get married, right? So that's the main source. You need to understand, because they're the ones that are going to tell you what they're buying, how much they're spending on it. So that's number one. You need to understand that. The second thing is you need to understand how many people get married, which that data comes from the states. So the states publish how many weddings take place. In fact, it's done at the county level, and each county has their own rules and they have their own laws and things around this stuff. And then that gets rolled up to the state level. And then eventually that gets rolled out to the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control, which actually manages vital stats. So marriage is a vital stat according to the US. So then when you have that, then you have to take local market data. So you might use ACS data which is the American Community Survey from the Census Bureau. You might take demography data from demographers that basically take various different data sources, pull it together, create demographics so you can understand the economics and demographics of a market. You need to understand how the market's changing. What's the what's the disposable income? What's the savings rate? What's the what's the inflation rate for different markets? What's the cost of living in different markets? And then you need to understand, like, well, how many businesses exist for different types of businesses, so you can kind of understand where people might travel and all this sort of thing. It's actually quite complicated. It's a lot more complicated than you would think, but yeah, that's what really goes into the estimates.
I don't think it's more complicated than I would think. I think it's what you're doing is basically impossible. So, one thing I always questioned about the data, it's not a question like questioning you, but it is like working in the part of the market we work in. I always get the feeling that data is not represented, because full service planners, they don't even let me talk to the client. That client's definitely not going to talk to you, or anyone. Do you feel like there are parts of the market that are harder to get data of than maybe other parts? And I mean financially speaking, like if someone's spending $2 million on a wedding, they have a full service planner that's being managed. Are you getting insight into those numbers in any way, or is it?
You get some, but you're right. It is harder to reach those people because they're probably not going to participate in a survey, right? They're just not going to do it. They just don't have the time or the willingness to do it. So that's where the other economic data helps kind of balance that part out, and you can kind of figure out, okay, well, if generally, I know generally how much people spend based on income. So if there's an income and how much they spend and what their demand factor is based on their income, then you can kind of look at the market and go, yes, there are 0.001% of the market makes more than $1 million in this area, right? So how does that impact the spending for this? How much does that impact the demand for this particular item that you're looking at? So it is harder to reach those people, but there's ways to get to that data. General survey methodology is you have a population, you get a sample. From the sample, you pretty much have a good representation within some margin of error. So, for the wedding industry, there's 2 million people that get married every year, roughly. Of that, you only need 388 samples to have a 95% confidence and a 5% margin of error. So, which is not a lot of samples, right? 388. So I try to collect as many as I can so that I can do a little more slicing and dicing, if you will, to try to understand different things. So
I'm sure, and we talked a little bit about in the pre-show, I'm sure you get a lot of pushback on certain numbers, certain aspects of the data that you're putting out. For years, I feel like one of the main surveys that at least wedding filmmakers and photographers, I've heard people actually talk about at weddings, is the data put out by the Knot and Wedding Wire and the reports that they put out. And the number, average number of wedding filmmaker or wedding photographer, everyone always kind of scoffs at it and is like, that is way lower and they're doing us an injustice and the industry is setting expectations
they actually think,
for
Jared,
the bride.
I think that they're bringing the price down. Like because of that, that's why the price is lower.
Right. And really just the people that we work with are oftentimes upset because they feel like it's setting the client up to have unreasonable expectations, right? And it's really like the data, in a lot of ways, it doesn't lie. It's at least the best source that you have for showing people what the average spend is. What kind of pushback do you get in general, and how do you, I guess, deal with that? What would your response be to people that are saying something like that?
Well, in the early days, I would get very offended, right? Because, it's like, I just put my heart and soul into this thing and you're telling me, and so I would get a little bit offended. But, as an adult, I'd have to learn how to be professional and that sort of thing. The reality is I just have to respond, hey, thanks for your input. I mean, what else can you say? I mean, they're frustrated, and I do get pushback, and it's usually from the folks that work in the higher areas of the market. And that's exactly what you guys said is exactly the same pushback I get. You guys are making the market, making the price go down and this and that. And that is the pushback. And I get it. I get where they're coming from. I get their frustration, but the data doesn't really lie. I'm not making this stuff up. This is what people are saying. And when you put it all together, that's the reality of the market. The median income in the U.S. is just $70,000. I mean, how do you expect someone to afford a $10,000 photographer or a filmmaker at that range? Right. It's not possible, right? And the same thing, like when you look at some data from some of the media companies and like, for example, engagement ring prices. I could never understand how their average would be somewhere in like the $5,000, $5,600 range, when the highest I've ever gotten an average was, and this is now like just right at $4,000. So I don't think that represents the full market because
I guess I was going to say, I bet a lot of it, my feeling on the way data works in the wedding industry, and you tell me if I'm wrong here because you know better than I do, is that the way this data, there's two ways the data is aggregated, and one is more accurate than the other. One is you ask customers. The other one is you ask providers. And providers all lie. like if you go into a wedding filmmaking group and you say, what are you like, how much are you selling for? That, like, the answer you're going to get is the highest package they've ever sold. They don't even do the math, by the way. They don't even know what their average is.
They wouldn't know how to get an average.
Yeah, and so like the way that, like, I'm looking at this right here. Nancy Narkin, they post, like I was telling you before, luxury wedding budgets, which is pretty good data because it's just the budget from the wedding.
From the wedding planner specifically.
The wedding planner provides it. They're luxury weddings. So typically over $400,000 total spend, which is where Jared and I find ourselves a lot. We're at a lot of these weddings. And in New England, there are hundreds of them. Like, absolutely. And so thousands, really, probably. Yeah, but this is what they posted. And this is what always bothers me, because I have a passion for wedding filmmakers and helping them grow as a business. And when they see this stuff, it messes with their brain, right? It says, okay, videographer price breakdown by price point. Budget, $2,500 to $5,000 for a wedding film. Lovely, $5,000 to $10,000 for a wedding film. Luxury, $20,000 to $30,000. Ultra luxury, $40,000 plus. Now, I'm pretty plugged in the wedding industry. I know all the best people that are doing the highest contracts. And like the highest paid person I know averages $20,000 a sale. What is this tier list? Like, it's insane. Like, it's garbage data. Am I wrong?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that gets thrown out there from a variety of different people. That's all I can say. I
Yeah.
mean, you either, I mean, as an individual, as a business, you're gonna have to like look at the information and you have to decipher it and kind of, like you looked at that and you go, that doesn't make any sense at all. I know a guy that's the best in the industry and he charges 20,000 on average, so that's not possible, right? Like, and I think we were talking earlier, like you guys, what did you say, like in the 7, 8,000, 10,000 range is probably the average for a decent film, right?
Yeah, I would say like in reality, this is just me anecdotally. I think 4,500 for like for a full-time wedding filmmaker who does a good job.
There you
But
go.
the issue is, and this is the part of the data that I think is really hard to track, and I'm curious kind of how your data falls into this, because Jared and I talk about it a lot. We live in an industry that is not mostly full-time people.
That's right.
And so like I'm competing with a guy who goes, I'm not competing with them, but I think a lot of people are, where they go like, oh, I don't really care. I just want to make 15 grand to go on a luxury vacation every year, but I have a job at this other thing making 150K. So I don't really care. I'm pretty good, blah, blah, blah. I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
And they go out and they sell 10 weddings out of their 20 book inquiries at a really low price. And it's fine for them. It doesn't affect them negatively. Like no business, like if you're in a business where you're competing with someone who doesn't need the money, expect the averages to be way dragged down. If everyone was full time, I think the averages would be higher. And I think that's what people get messed up is like, yes, if you want to be full time in this industry, you probably can't get away. I think, what is your average right now on a wedding film on the site? It's like 1,800 ish, probably, right?
No, for a videographer, that doesn't mean a wedding film. So they would probably, it'd be higher than that.
Oh, is there a difference?
Yeah. So tell us the difference in your mind, or I guess according to
Well,
the
in my
data.
mind, it's like you said, okay, I hired a videographer, and that doesn't mean you did a film, right? But it just means that you hired a videographer to do some shooting. Whether you got a film out of that or not, it doesn't matter, right? That was their fee to do whatever they did for you.
So like even like
Specifically,
guys
I
who
don't
do
ask
tape
about a
or
wedding film, right? Like you guys are a very specialty, right, with what you're doing. You might say, oh, well, if you hire a videographer, I'm doing a wedding film for you. So I don't know.
I would say what we do is industry standard. Like
Okay.
like across the board. Like anyone who's selling this is selling a highlight film, 4 to 6 minutes, pretty much. Like everyone's doing that. Sometimes they deliver the full ceremony, sometimes they don't. But and that's pretty much what everyone's doing. And like I think the issue is like you're dealing with consumers' definitions,
Yes.
like provider definitions, like all of these things in converging into one.
And that's an interesting take that you just said, because the reality is most consumers have no idea, right? Because I have asked them on more than one occasion, I've asked them about, because we always talk about professionals in the industry, right? People's talking about, oh, I'm a professional photographer, I'm a professional DJ, but there's no real licensing model that says you're a professional or not, right? Not like a lawyer or a doctor. So how do you know you hired a professional, right? So you ask a consumer, they have no idea. In fact, if you ask a consumer about photography, less than 50% of people say that they actually hired a professional photographer. The rest of them said they just hired somebody to do the work. So how do you know? And then if you look at planners, it's less than 20%. Yes, I hired a professional planner to do my work. Right? To do my wedding. They don't have no idea. So you're right. The definition between folks that work in the industry directly, like you guys, professionals that, you've been doing this for a while. I would consider anyone that's done this for more than 10 years, or at least probably more than 5 years, a professional in what they're doing, especially if they're doing it full time. Right. But outside of that, I mean, who knows, right? There's lots of definitions.
And that's the nature of the industry, right? Is like the consumer chooses.
Consumer chooses, yes. So it's really what their definition of that would be. I asked them, do they hire a wedding videographer? And then they say yes. And then we ask them how much they paid for it. So essentially that's where we got. Yeah,
and it's hard to break it down to like, what what did you buy from them?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What did you buy? And ideally, so it would be ideal if I could get more information from them about, okay, well, what did that include? Did that include this, and this, or this, and this, right? Tell me what that included. But, getting more details on that is, number one, it's a lot more expensive to collect all this data as it is. So to get more details becomes a question of, well, will I get a return on the investment? Because the problem is, it's a business, right? I run a business. It's not a not-for-profit business. It's a for-profit business. And the reality is I got to look at, okay, where can I get the most return on my investment for collecting data? And so getting details for certain parts of the business just doesn't add up for a return. So
Totally.
Yeah, fascinating. I was going to say, I mean, I think we were talking to a wedding planner just a couple weeks ago and telling her about because she's ultra luxury. She's working with $20,000 videographers often. And the world that we were talking to her about, she was like, she didn't even know it existed, essentially. She was like, the photographers who don't charge any money that, are doing it as their first gig. Like, I was going to say, I wouldn't be surprised at all if for videographers, it was like 70% of people are charging a couple $100 and they're just doing it for a friend.
Well,
like,
that's the whole
that's
thing.
a majority of the population in the US.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I remember I was on Twitter at one point, and I actually didn't really know who they were. I just saw it pop up. They said something about the wedding industry and how terrible it is that people spend money. And they referenced something that they thought was people should just be focused on their love and getting married or whatever idiotic take they had. And I remember saying something like, I mean, I see $80,000 florals all the time. Like, so I don't know what you're talking about. And one thing I think is really fascinating is because the point I eventually made to people who are coming at me, I said, listen, I don't consider, like, look, say you get a caterer, right? A lot of people everyone's getting food at their wedding. But most people, they're going to go to like a barbecue place and get it catered. That person is not in the wedding industry.
yes.
So the data they're providing, right, is like, oh, I paid $20 a head for my food.
yeah,
They hired a vendor that I would not consider to be a wedding industry vendor.
that's right.
They hired just any vendor. And so consumer data and then the wedding industry, there's some overlap, but there's also almost like a black box that the industry has where it's like you're in an industry wedding or you're just getting married. And so
that's the challenge, Jay, with the fact that understanding the real economics of weddings, you have to think about those things because Chick-fil-A is a caterer.
Mhm.
I could go cater my entire wedding at Chick-fil-A, right?
they just saw an
McDonald's
ad for that. Didn't you see that ad they ran?
No, I didn't.
They
see
ran
an
that
ad.
exact
So
ad about a guy who caterer canceled and they got Chick-fil-A for their wedding. That was the last wedding that Chick-fil-A made that I saw. And I'm like, yeah, that's true.
So how do you count those people into the wedding industry? They're not technically part of the black box of the industry, but they are a vendor in the industry because they catered a wedding.
Mhm.
So you have to think about, this is where the full economics of understanding the wedding industry makes it critical for a business to survive. If you're going to grow and survive your business, you got to be thinking about these things. You guys have already done it. You already told me earlier in the pre-show, you have 3 different tiers of business, right?
Mhm.
Because you thought about this stuff and go, look, yes, we cater to higher end weddings, but we also understand that there's a sub market here where we can grow our business. If you think about all the luxury brands out there, we're talking about all the luxury brands. Think about what the ones in the wedding industry specifically have done, right? Think about like Vera Wang, any of the luxury brands you would think about in the wedding industry, right? They have all created sub products within different markets to reach different consumers. How in the heck do they expect to grow their business 2, 3, 4% year over year if you don't reach down and make other products and services where you can grow your business 2 or 3%?
Yeah.
Michael Kors does an amazing amount of business at the outlet malls. Why? Because that's where most of his consumers buy his products.
That's where the money is. That's where I always tell people, I'm like, the money's in the middle, guys. The money is not at the top. The top you use to validate the middle. If you're in brand building, like the top of whatever you're doing luxury wise is never going to be that profitable.
No,
it's just not how it is. It's like, and it requires like the level of effort it requires by the person to stay at the top is exhausting. Like you must go to, like Jared and I have been to 3 or 4 networking events already in the last 6 weeks. We have to
going to Engage next week.
We have to go to Engage again at the end of the year. We have to go to Canary Islands. We had to go to Naples, Florida. We have to go talk to people. More than half the time, I don't make $1 off those trips. Yeah. And I might not get a single person, but we go because I don't want anyone else to be seen. I want to be seen. I need to keep my recognition up. I have to go and make appearances it's like, as an artist, I'm okay with that. But as a business person, I want to spend money and then make money. And that's how actual businesses run. They just want dependable ROI on the money that they spend.
You do.
And I think a lot of wedding filmmakers or industry people don't understand how actual money is made because their nut is so small. They're just like, oh, that's so cool. I made $100,000 gross revenue with my business. And I'm like, great.
What's your profit though?
Right. They don't even know.
Well, I mean, the reality is you can do $1 million in sales, but if you make zero profit, what point is it, right? It's nothing, right? The point of being a business is to make a profit so you can grow, so you can do other things, so you can support and take care of yourself, so you can support and take care of the people that work for you, right? I mean, that's really the goal.
Yeah.
And if you can provide a decent enough product and service for people, and you can make a good living off of that, and be able to maintain that and grow it year over year, then you've got something. But otherwise, it's difficult. So I don't know how. Like you look at like some of these business models, like Uber and some of these other things. I don't know how they stay unprofitable for like a decade, and they're still. I just don't get it, man. Like, how do you?
I mean, I think American economy is based on borrowing money pretty much exclusively. Yeah, but the problem is that like clouds people's concept of how to run a business, because like that guy's playing a different game than you. He's playing the venture capital game. You are playing the I'm running a business and I need to walk away with some cash game. Yeah.
That's the game you're playing, yes, and that's the game majority of everyone in this business is playing, right? Mm-hmm. So, for sure.
Shane, so we've had a couple years. The last probably 5 years have been weird to say the least, right?
Weird. It's been the weirdest ever, yes, for sure.
Weird years, and I'm sure collecting data the last 4 or 5 years has been really fun for you. Agencies are closed, oh my God, I can't even imagine. I think a lot of people would probably like to know kind of where the industry is going, right? Sure. You have a lot of people this year who are saying it's a down year. They're seeing way less bookings. We know on our end, a lot of people came into the industry around 2020, 2021, people that are sitting at home watching the Wedding Film School show saying, I should start my own wedding film company. Everyone came in, had a blast, exploded in 2022, well, don't forget, Jared, 2023.
All the people who in 2020 with their 2021 reschedules they turned down all the leads they got for 2021 and they created all their competitors.
Right. And so now we're seeing a little bit of a dip, at least this is kind of what we hear from people. Maybe explain, to people a little bit about where the industry is going. Do you see the wedding industry trending down or trending up? Maybe create a little bit of clarity for people at home.
Sure.
That might be worried about where their business is going.
Yeah. So there's a great study out of a couple of universities called the National Marriage Project, and they have couple of really good. They do a publication every couple of years. The last one was 2022, And it talks about marriage trends and how that's happening and that sort of thing. The reality of the industry is this. The number of people getting married is declining, and it's been declining since 1984. In fact, 1984 was the highest number of weddings we ever had in the US, and 2022 was probably up there it was supposed to be up there in the 2.4 million range, which is what I had estimated based on all the cancellations and stuff. But it turns out it really actually wasn't that much. It was right around 2.1 million, which is kind of concerning because you're like, what happened to 200 or 300,000 weddings of people that we pretty much missed in 2020, right? And 2021. So either they decided not to get married, they broke up, or what, who knows what happens, right? But essentially the industry probably lost about 200 or 300,000 weddings in general. 2022 was it was a better year, and in a lot of places, because there was a there was a couple of things that happened, right? So there was a bunch of mass migration. If you remember, people started moving to different cities like Texas and Florida. The South of the United States grew significantly population-wise. Because people were just moving to different places. They wanted to get lower taxes and a variety of different things. I think there was a lot of pieces up in play, but I think some of the cities that saw a significant amount of increase were because of migration issues. And then of course, there was a down year in 2020, 2021. And so there was the reschedules and all that stuff that took place as well. There's this whole concept of this engagement gap thing that's been thrown around the industry. Personally, I don't see any data that supports the engagement gap. The only thing that shows that, okay, Signet had a down year for sales, and they continue to have a down year for sales, but they've been having a down year for a long time. In fact, they acquired 2 businesses between 2020 and 2023 that actually helped their sales numbers, but they were still down. And if you look at independent jewelers, there's a research company out there called Tenorus, and they do independent, they look at independent jewelers, not the large chain stores. Like Signet is a huge chain store owner. So there's a couple things at play there. One is the Tenorus numbers show that it was down also, but it wasn't down as much as Signet had shared. The other thing with the Signet numbers is that Signet, majority of their stores, probably pre-23, was all mall traffic. Most of their stores were in malls. I think 80% of their stores were in malls. It's down to 60% now. But if you think about malls, how many people go to malls anymore, right? So mall traffic's down. So that would impact their sales as well. It's not like there's this, I don't think there's an engagement gap. I went back and looked, I thought about that. I go, because someone hit me up and go, hey, what's up with this engagement gap thing? And I'm like, what are you talking about, right? And so if you think about it, yes, there were places that were down, right? Like there were bars that were closed. You couldn't go to public spaces, but there were a lot of states that were still open doing things. And the restrictions for people going outside and doing things outside, people were mobile. If you look at Google mobility data for the COVID time period, there were more people outside than ever before. In fact, they were out doing things. In fact, national parks had a record years, right? In 2021, 2022, 2020 as well. So they had record years and people were going out and doing stuff. So they were involved dating apps. So you go, okay, well, if people weren't dating, getting together, what the heck's going on? Dating app data should be down, right? No, dating apps had record numbers for dating apps. So people were hooking up, they were getting together. Wasn't like they weren't. So I find it hard to believe that there's actually a gap. If there is a gap, it's probably a couple of months. And does that really justify a 20 or 30% drop?
I'm curious about this, not to get into culture war stuff or any of that crap, but my theory has always been when an entire nation tells an entire generation of people that marriage is a lie and not to do it, that they will not do it. And that the industry is trying to walk and chew gum here a little bit, right? In a bad way, where we're trying to support cultural things that actually destroy our industry because it's like hookup apps are the opposite of the wedding industry. They destroy the wedding industry. if like have you the marriage rates of men, when I look at the fertility rates, like these are marriage statistics. When men don't date women, when they don't want to go and actually be in serious relationships, when there are literally beautiful women on Twitter every day saying, I can't find a man. And then there are endless amounts of men who are addicted to pornography and addicted to addicted to their phones, play video games 24/7. Yeah. Like I'm not saying we need to get into those issues, but I'm saying, like, to me, when I think about the wedding industry, those are the things that I think about. It's like, are people aspiring with their life to be a husband and a wife? And
no, they're not, because the culture has changed, right? Yeah. And the reality of the culture has changed significantly. You brought up a couple of really good issues right there, but the other issues are back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, the reason for getting married was much different than it is today. So back then, the reason people got married was to create a family. The woman would stay home and take care of the kids. The husband would go to work, right? And that was the general nature of how family was generated,
was structured that way.
Yeah.
We also went through a huge, the largest divorce rate in the history of the country. Divorce rates were 50% from that time range, right? So there's that factor that's pushed into the millennial generation that says, hey, wait, we don't want to get, like, our parents got divorced. Why would we want to get divorced? Or why would we want to get married? The second thing is women no longer need that as a way to generate a family. They can do family dynamics have changed significantly. There's more women that are educated. There's more women graduating from degrees today than there is in any other time in our history. And the need for them to actually get married and have that family significant doesn't exist anymore. I also just read a recent article that talked about couples are living together, but not having kids. They're just living together because they want to have the dual income and be able to go and travel and do things, right? So they're living this other whole life because they just want to go have fun and do stuff. So there are people that are building wealth as if they were married, but they're just cohabitating together. The marriage part, there's a significant culture change in the need to get married. It's not necessary anymore.
I think this is why you have that black box of the luxury side. I read a study that said, basically, the only people who are living traditional values in America are rich people. And everywhere outside of the ultra wealthy, everything is decreasing, which is why the numbers are hard to track, because when the weddings that we shoot, right, these are families that are passing something down. They own lots of land. They own businesses. It's good for their image and with the people they are, and they love each other. I'm not like cynical of like that but it's like they have incentive to build this traditional lifestyle. When you deal with like an average person, the incentive goes down and down and down and down for these people, and they're just not doing it. It's something like it used to be that people who were lower income were more likely to do these things. And so you have most people are lower income. That's just how society works. Most people are not millionaires. They don't come from old money. But now that is totally shifted. And so it's almost like I read basically the article said, is marriage becoming a luxury? And it's like, I'm not saying that to alarm people, but I am saying it does explain like why the luxury industry has its own sets of data. Because we're dealing with like this tiny segment of the American population that has their, it's funny is like the $2,500 per guest is not unusual for a wedding I would shoot.
Yeah, makes sense.
Can you imagine me and you, all three of us, could we, $2,500 per guest? And you invite 200 people?
Yeah, that's insane, right?
Right? It's not insane for them. They don't care. Some of them do it 3 times with 3 different kids.
True. It's true. But, that's a very small segment of the market, like you talked about, right? Like it's just like the number of people that spend more than $30,000 in this industry is less than 17%. So if you think about that, I mean, how many people really spend way more than that? And I think I was looking at some numbers from the ACS recently, and I think it's like 0.0001% of people that got married in the past year earned more than $1 million of household income. So if you think about the ultra luxury and the people that are really spending money in that realm, then it's a very, very small percentage of the market. It varies by market, right? Obviously, Boston is a different market than you would say Tucson, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of, so the reality is the market is going to get more difficult to get more weddings out of. It's not, I don't think, unless Gen Z changes, and I don't think Gen Z is going to change, because their general statement about marriage is they see zero value in it. So if you think about that, then I don't think the numbers are going to increase for the number of people getting married. And in fact, if you look at population trends, there's less people getting married, or less people being born. So eventually that number is going to decrease unless like the Alpha generation or even Gen Z change their attitudes around marriage, which it might change, right? So if you got a millennial generation that went through a high divorce rate with their parents, and then there's this huge culture shift into just cohabitating, eventually the pendulum will swing back, right, at some point and go, oh, we should get married, right? Like it just always happens in culture wars, right? There's pendulums swing one way or the other. So there might be some balancing out, but I don't think we won't see anything more than 2.1 million for a long time that I can see on the horizon. So what does that really mean, right? That means that you got to be on your game, right? As a vendor in this space, you need to understand the numbers of the business, and you need to understand the numbers of your business so you can compete and so that you can provide the product and services about the market, right? It's about, like we talked about this in the pre-show. It's about the market. It's not about us as a business. It's about what does the market want, and then you have to look at that, and you have to figure out how you can compete in that market.
Yeah, I can say that most likely we started our lower tier company, Merriment Films, starting at $2,000 because of probably the wedding report. Because we looked at it, we were like, our current brand, we're only servicing probably 3% of all weddings, like the budget wise. And so we were like, there's a huge segment of people looking for wedding
at least
filmmakers.
at the time. I think it was 70% of the market.
And I'm not sure what percentage of people that are out there that are getting married can even afford like a $2,000 wedding film, or a lot of people are either forgoing them or hiring someone part-time or hiring a friend or whatever. But we were like, let's find out.
Because there's more of a market, right?
Right.
So
right. Yeah. Bigger, wider net, maybe smaller fish, but it's like, to us, that's worthwhile. And then we have a whole philosophy on like, hey, we have second shooters that are working with us on the high end. Maybe they can go out and shoot their own end. So we kind of have like a sales ladder, staff ladder on the back end.
Yeah.
That works out, and it gives people the opportunity to try things out. But always trying new things. That's what I like about numbers is they inspire me. I'm like, I wonder about this. Let's try it out. And Jay and I can never find enough trouble to get into. So.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I remember at one point, I can't remember the data, but I remember we looked at the total amount of weddings in Massachusetts and how many we were doing. And I was like, it was close to 1% of all weddings at that price point. And I was like, we're not going to do more than that. There's no possible way we're going to get 3% of market share of all wedding filmmakers. Maybe, but like those kind of like personal moments when you look at data that are like, they'll kind of temper your ambition, because you'll say like, this isn't reasonable. What I'm trying to accomplish with my business isn't reasonable. And when you look at data, like I'm not ripping on Nancy Narkins with their data, because I think they're getting it from their little ecosystem. And for their ecosystem, it might be true. But if you're not like, which I don't think it is, because when you look at their own weddings, they don't actually, this one, they're not actually getting the numbers that they think they're getting. But regardless, it's like, when I look at the data set, like at the end of the day, like, am I going to really be able to compete for that? And I think you got to if you're not afraid of data, it will actually give you a lot of freedom to make choices and to not feel so insecure.
Jay, I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what it does, right? It gives you the freedom to understand, what are the possibilities of what I can do in my market, right? And if you collect data about like, there's, the thing that I think businesses miss the most, and you guys probably do this, but collecting where your customers are coming from and then mapping that back to geography so you can understand what geographies you might be wanting to reach out to is hugely important, right? Like you might not understand that half of your customers come from maybe 100 miles away and you go, well, crap, I didn't know that. And if you knew that and you go, well, if they're coming from 100 miles away, who else can I reach 100 miles away that I might be able to reach, right? Like there's so much opportunity in looking at data to help you kind of like get real about the market, but also help you understand what you can and can't do, right? Oh, here's opportunities right here. Like, oh, this is my core customer. This is what it looks like. And it's not just all your customers, right? Like you might say, if you map out your customers, you should be associating them with how much you earned profit, right, from a customer, and then kind of try and figure out where are my most profitable customers coming from? What are my most profitable segments and product that I'm selling? And then you can, once you figure that part out, then you kind of look at what you're providing as that service. How can you streamline that, and how can you make that more efficient cost-wise, right? If you think about the Walmart model, and I know people hate to talk about Walmart in the wedding industry, but if you think about what they do, it's really pretty brilliant. They actually make billions of dollars in profit, and yet they are the lowest priced provider in the market, right? So they have streamlined the process of getting that product to the customer in such a way that it provides them with a significant amount of profit that makes it easier. So if you take that kind of general idea and go, what am I providing as a product for this segment? How can I streamline that and make that more efficient? What can I not provide, right? How can I make it more efficient? You can squeeze more profit out of that one thing, right? Just that one thing alone. So.
Shane, early in the show, you had mentioned that you're adding, was it 50 categories?
Different items, yeah.
New
so
items?
looking at the main categories, I think there's like 16 different categories. Like I want to expand on the photography items, photography and video items. I want to expand on the attire and various different things.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to expand on the
You're
items.
gonna have to add content creators soon.
I know. I was going to ask you, is one of those content creators?
Do you know about
No,
that? That's the next thing, my friend. That's what we're all facing, is people who just go with their cell phone and put that crap together. Is that video? Is that photo? What is that? It's like, that's the challenge of all this, is like,
Yeah.
the consumer might say, I hired a videographer. You did? Oh, they shot with their phone. I'm like,
Yeah,
that's not a
that's
videographer.
exactly.
That's a content creator. Well, no, to me,
Yeah.
they're a videographer.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You got to understand what the customers, their philosophy and the way that they think about things. Right. And if you understand that, then you can go, oh, well, there's an opportunity here, right? Like instead of harping on the problems that are the issues, right? That a professional would say, oh, like the cost thing, like we talked about that earlier, right? Instead of harping on that and being all mad about it, look at that as an opportunity to go, look, okay, so the reality is this is what people are paying on average. Where can I create a new product to fit into that category? Yep. There's someone that I just recently was chatting with about business in general, and they have they do photography, planning and DJ work. I think mostly DJ work was kind of their thing, but
yes, I know the type.
but they did the same thing that you guys are doing. They take my data and look at the average and go, okay, well, this is the average in the market. Let me create a product that's right in that range, and let me go out and see what I can do. Well, now they're killing it, right? And they're getting a ton of business and they're making a profit on it. Now they're going to take their model and expand it to different cities, and then grow their business. So yeah, you can do it. It's not, it's all there for you. You just got to look at what people are, because the luxury part of this business only wants to focus on the luxury part of this business. Well, that market is shrinking. We already know that. So if that's the case, what else are you going to do? You're just going to hang it up? And there's more people coming into that space that's really competing for your market, right? Everyone wants to be in the luxury part of this business. I don't know why, but they want to be. So that's it.
It's because it feels good when you're the best.
It's cool. It's better, right? Like
you want to be the best. I want to be the best. This is the thing. I always tell people, you should push as hard as you want to push. You don't, just because it looks unlikely, you should still try. If you want to do it, try. But and this is the big big caveat is you're likely to fail. And it's okay. It has nothing to do with you. There's so many like random things that come into succeeding and jumping markets from one level to the next level. Why do you think people, and like, you know, we're kind of getting to the end, but so I wanted to kind of ask about this is why do you think people have such a hard time accepting that the data is telling them that it is unlikely that they will be able to jump into whatever the next level is? Why do you think that is so hard for people? And what would you say to someone to kind of get them to, you know, not stop chasing their dreams, not push, but also still use common sense and reality to inform their choices?
I think it's human nature, right? We all want to do better. We all want to do more, right? Especially if you're a entrepreneur, right? Or someone who's really, you know, like wants to do something with your business. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. People saying stuff that, you know, hey, you just go raise your, I mean, you guys already said this. We already talked about this before. Like, oh, just go raise your prices, right? Just raise your prices, raise your prices, raise your prices. Well, at some point, no one can afford you. So you might want to rethink that model, right? So I would say if you have really good experience and you're really tied into the market and you're at a point where you're filled up, you can't do any more, and you're at a certain price point, yeah, raise your prices, right? Your costs go up, you can't do anything, you have to raise your prices. But be realistic about it. Don't be insane about it like some of these companies go, oh, we're going to raise the price by 20%. Really? Thanks a lot, man. I'm not doing business with you anymore, right? Like, so, I mean, you know, you have to be realistic about it.
Yeah. I think a lot of people,
human nature, Jay. I mean, people just want, that's what they want, right? It's a business.
Yeah. I think a lot of people fell into that trap a couple of years ago where they did meet that demand, but they didn't realize that the demand was because of the pandemic. Like,
it's artificial.
It's artificial. It's not real. So they were like told by, you know, we say influencers and people that are educators or whatever, like raise your prices, like, you know, and I would normally tell people like, hey, if you meet demand, raise your prices.
Yes.
But it's all, like Jay said, it's all artificial. It's inflated. It's not a real world. And so now people are coming back down being like, nobody is booking me. And then other people are like, I'm full. And, you know, so there's this back and forth of like really just people misunderstanding the market because, you know, they're both right. One person's not getting booked, but they're probably too expensive. The other person is getting booked because...
And they could be the same price too.
Yeah.
That's the part that confuses people is like, well, this guy's 5 and I'm 5. Why am I too expensive? It's like he has 200 leads a year and you have 30.
Yeah.
You have no market reach. You have no demand. Nobody knows who you are.
Yep.
You're not on anybody's list. You don't... Even the idea of a referral tree. Like, you don't have referrals. Like, there's so many parts that go into this business that are actually really hard to put into data. And even as great as your data is, if you don't understand how to read it, you're not going to be in a good position to actually utilize it. So what would be your biggest tip if someone gets the wedding report? We want people to do it. So if you're listening to this, I really encourage you to head over wedding.report. I think this is like an essential tool for if you're in the industry, but you're looking at the data and like, what would be your biggest tip for people to interpret data better about the wedding industry?
So for one, I would say that the most important thing is to understand this total market. What's the total reach? Really get a grasp on demand, because demand is the number of people that are willing to buy that product or service. That's hugely important. A lot of people miss that. They think that because there's 1,000 weddings, I'm going to get 1,000 customers. That's not true at all, right? Like and then if you're segmented within that demand, then you got to look at what your smaller piece is. And then I would really look at, from a spending perspective, look at the average, the median, and then the distribution, which is really a frequency distribution from a mathematics perspective, but it's really, I call it buckets, and it's really the buckets of spending that people spend in ranges. So spending ranges, look at that, look at your average, and look at the median, kind of find where the core of the market is and start there. especially if you're getting started. If you're already in business and you're doing stuff, you're in the luxury space, maybe you want to try and grow your business a couple percentage points, look at that space and see if there's something you can do. That's the biggest thing I would take away from it is what's the total market, what's the demand, and then kind of really look at the spending piece to kind of understand where can I fit in here? What are the opportunities? Then if you layer on top of that, like the demographics, like age ranges, because there's a lot of people that are in the 50 plus that are getting remarried, right? So is there an opportunity there in your market, particularly in your market? Let's say you're in Lake Havasu, which is a huge retirement community in Arizona, and that's where you are. Well, yeah, there's people hooking up and getting married over there. So that might be an opportunity for you, right?
Yeah, you have to think of like, okay, like if you're on a fixed income and you're getting married, what can you afford? What would they want? Like what kind of video would a retired person want? Who are they giving this video to? How are they watching this video? Like all of that stuff comes down into like, who are my customers? And this is the thing. Beautiful people is not a demographic.
Yeah. You got to look at who your customers are. You got to look at the market. You really have to look at the market and go, what is the market telling me? And then go from there. I mean, if you're not already doing this, you should be. Like, look at like your local economics data. What projects are happening in your local community? Are there new businesses coming in? If there's new businesses coming in, are there opportunities there for you? I mean, the other thing I would say for anyone getting into the business or even trying to grow is what leveraged sales are you using? I did a recent study with venues, and I noticed that venues that are making the most, they're getting the most return on they're doing the most conversions on their lead, like 50% conversion on their leads, and they're getting hundreds of leads a month. And so the reason they're doing that is because they have all of these different sources that they're trying to get leads from, right? They have leverage sales from working with other people in the industry, from referrals, from word of mouth. What are you doing to develop a leverage sale part of your business, right? You should be doing that because that means that you have to spend less money on marketing. You're just building relationships with people in your space so that you can get the sales from those relationships, right? And your word of mouth, right? Like if you already have existing customers, make sure you're asking them for other customers, right? They know people that are getting married too. So hopefully you did a great job and you can get business from them. So that would be my last parting advice on that.
Cool. Oh my gosh, Shane, I feel like we could talk to you all day. You like speak our language. Like Jay and I always talk about like diversifying our marketing. Like, a lot of people will be like, oh, I don't do that. I don't spend on any kind of marketing. And for us, we've always been like, do a little bit of everything, like figure out what works best. Why are you only, cornering yourself to one thing? And then, it could be detrimental to your business because what happens if that planner moves and you relied on her for all of your leads? Like, so it just, I think, helps with the longevity.
Or they just do a bad job running their business and they don't
run it into the ground. Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like Moneyball.
Yeah.
Right? Like I remember that book Moneyball, and that's really helped my business because it's like the thing I've always tried to do is like if someone else devalues a statistic, then I know that it'll be cheap. So it's like if everyone hates the knot, well, as long as the knot has right now we're not advertising on the knot because it's not converting.
Yeah.
But for a while we knew everyone hated the knot, and I knew that means that I could corner it.
Yeah,
like
you can get more business from it. Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly.
And so it's like so many people in the industry are like, "Oh, this person told me not to do this. Oh, this person said not to do this," and I'm like, "They told everyone not to do this. Everyone is going to do it." Like the fact that someone said go to Engage. I don't know if you're aware of what Engage is, but go to Engage. Okay, great. Like we're going to go to Engage. I don't have a problem going to Engage. If I go to Engage and there are 50 wedding filmmakers there, you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to go to Engage anymore. It's not cheap. Yeah. It costs like $8,000 to go to that. And if I go and there's a bunch of other people there, I know like, do I want to get into a pit fight with these people? No, that's not financially reasonable. So I think when you look at data, it will give you an opportunity to be realistic and it will calm your ambition. It will also help you with your insecurities as a artist because we want to be acknowledged. We want people to recognize that we're good at something. We want our work to be perceived as valuable. And I think the biggest advice I give people is depersonalize that business. It's not you.
Yep.
Yep.
That's not you. What you're selling is not you. As far as the customer is concerned, it's a product. Did you meet their demand? Even if it's the most personalized piece of art that's ever been made by anyone, it's just a product.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, let's wrap this up. Shane, thank you so much for being on, man. We got to have you on again sometime. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for the work that you do at the Wedding Report. I encourage everyone to go on. Just check it out, guys. It's really awesome, and it provides so much value for what the cost is. I would say, yeah, definitely check it out. I think it's been awesome for our business.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it. It's great meeting you both, and love what you guys doing.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for listening to the Wedding Film School Show. We'll see you again here next week on the Wedding Film School Show.